It's time for you to meet the real Agent Argylle.
Finally, it's been 3 months of watching this goddamn trailer before every movie I see in theaters. I just want to watch 4 things in peace. With Argylle hitting theaters this year, I decided it would be fun to look at the collected works of Matthew Vaughn. Because love him or hate him, he has certainly left his mark on the action genre. Every few months, we get a new action comedy that is very clearly inspired by his movies. I'm looking at you, Ryan Gosling Fall Guys. Obviously, he's not the most prestigious director, but you can definitely see his mark on each of his films. And now that he's temporarily broken free from his self-imposed Mark Millar prison, it's a great time to look back on the past 20 years of his career.
I'll treat tomorrow's lunch like the Last Supper, feign interest in the old boy's nostalgic tales, and then leave quietly forever.
If you told me this film was made by Guy Ritchie, I'd believe you. After producing his first 3 films, it's very clear that Matt was inspired by his style when making Layer Cake, a British, drug-filled crime thriller featuring a colorful cast of nicknamed bozos. Yeah, I wonder where he got that idea. Now, the film isn't a complete ripoff. You can definitely see the start of Matt's own flair. He's got those transitions. Obviously, he's known for action scenes, but he loves a really cool transition. And his humor hasn't quite reached its peak. There's a mix of him and Guy Ritchie in this one, of course, but you can still see his kind of jokes in the visuals. But something I don't see people talking about enough is how somehow Matt keeps managing to cast people before they break into the mainstream. Layer Cake alone has so many. So now it is time for the recurring segment of Before They Were Big Super Famous. Of course, the protagonist is pre-Bond Daniel Craig, and this one shot definitely got him that gig. But we've also got Ben Whishaw, Sally Hawkins, and Tom Goddamn Hardy. Really, my biggest problem with the film is that, despite its simple plot on paper of criminal man gets betrayed so he works his way up the underworld ladder out of revenge, watching it I was confused with where we were going. Like, I don't know if it was the pacing or the screenplay or if I'm just an idiot, but it was still cool, so I'm not complaining too much. And can't forget the incredible performance from the late great Michael Gambon. Easily one of, if not the best part of the movie.
Dumbledore's got style.
This guy's also in the movie, that's why this is funny. Okay, this is the one that stands out the most. Amongst the action movies and comic book adaptations is this really genuine fantasy adventure. Stardust came out in a post-Harry Potter, post-Lord of the Rings world, but tonally feels more like an 80s movie like Willow or The Princess Bride. It's authentic, but it's goofy and it knows it, and it has tons of classic fantasy elements, witches, princes, unicorns, pirates. But the twists on these tropes is what really makes it. They ain't just pirates, they're lightning pirates, and whenever a prince dies, he comes back as a ghost that is frozen in the state that he died in. And they got good-ass actors like Michelle Pfeiffer and Peter O'Toole goofing it up, but the king of the goofs is Robert De Niro. Forget Raging Bull, forget Godfather Part 2, he should have won the Oscar for Captain fucking Shakespeare! And now, welcome back to Before They Were Big Super Famous. This time we got Daredevil and Superman. But yeah, some of the effects haven't aged super well, and there's some pacing issues from juggling multiple characters' journeys, but it's hard to deny how creative and just fun this movie is. Oh, and check this shit out. Here we go. The one I hadn't seen before making this video. I tried to watch it when I was younger, but I used to be a bit of a bitch when it came to blood in movies, so I bailed. But now that I'm a big boy, I was kind of excited to cross Kick-Ass off my comic book movie bingo card, and I liked it quite a bit. Now I do want to get some complaints out of the way. I think it could have been a little bit shorter, trim some of the fat, and there's definitely a handful of jokes that have not aged super well. But for every miss, there's 2 jokes that still land. Essentially, it's Superbad with superheroes, so it has that high school edgy loser style of comedy. It's got really good digs and twists at classic superhero tropes, but it still plays into the unabashed pulp of comic books, and even has some goofing on other superhero movies and TV. And with Matt's specific brand of action comedy, all these elements blend together really well. But the cast is what really makes the vibe. We got a guy from Superbad, we got the guy from Superbad, and starring in this week's segment of Before They Were Big Super Famous, it's not 1, but 2 Quicksilvers, and Chloe Grace Moretz as Murder Child. And with a dash of
Nick fucking
got a really solid superhero parody that doesn't mock comic books, but plays into the stereotypes for the fun of it.
Oh my god, this is Kids with Knives!
Coming off the movie I've seen the least, I genuinely don't know how many times I've seen X-Men First Class. Growing up, I loved the X-Men movies, good and bad, but this one is probably the best of the bunch, or at least the best X-Men movie starring the actual X-Men team. After Last Stand and Wolverine Origins, the series really needed a win, and First Class was able to actually capture the spirit of the X-Men. Between super fun montages and comic-accurate costumes, there's really great drama about prejudice and identity that not many entries in the franchise succeed at. Mystique gets to be more than just sex assassin by actually getting a character arc that makes sense for her place in the world. But the big draw is the younger versions of Professor X and Magneto and their relationship. They're both properly fleshed out characters, so they feel like real friends every time they have an argument or discussion. The chemistry that James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender have is really on par with Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, and it's totally believable that these new versions of the characters will eventually turn into the ones from the first trilogy. And speaking of the cast, it's time for Before They Were Big Super Famous. We got Zoe Kravitz, Nicholas Hoult, and Jennifer Lawrence 1 year before she popped the fuck off with the Hunger Games. I honestly can't get over how this keeps happening. But yeah, of course there's stupid shit. It is an X-Men movie after all. I'm not gonna pretend that what happens to Darwin isn't ridiculous. And Matt definitely had to mix in his brand with the established X-Men style, instead of making something entirely him. But I gotta admit, this movie's fun as hell, and I'll probably watch it many more times.
Kinky.
It feels like Kingsman: The Secret Service is the movie Matthew Vaughn had been building up to, right? It's got the crude humor from Kick-Ass, the training young people to save the world from X-Men, and the British from Layer Cake. Yeah. Just felt like a natural build-up to Kingsman. I'd say it's the pinnacle of his career at this point. And you can absolutely feel the influence, because every action movie nowadays is either this, or John Wick, or both. But I do think Original Recipe Kingsman just works on a lot of levels. It's a solid action comedy with great comedy and even better action, but it has the extra element of being a homage to 1960s Bond movies. It pokes fun at the goofy gadgets and wild villain schemes, but embraces these aspects as a part of the genre. It's really in your face about being different.
This ain't that kind of movie, bruv.
So I can see why that won't be everyone's cup of tea, but I bought into the ridiculousness and enjoyed the ride. And honestly, I think my favorite thing in Kingsman is the cast. Every spy movie role has a great performance attached to it. Colin Firth is the experienced agent, Sam Jackson is the silly yet menacing villain, Mark Strong is the guy in the chair, so far and so forth. And of course, for Before They Were Big Super Famous, there's Sophia Boutella as the gimmick henchman and Taron Egerton as Egg. Maybe Kingsman isn't as successful as a Bond parody as something like Austin Powers, but it has certainly created its own space in the action comedy world. Especially when Matt just keeps making them. Alright, I just want to say that I do like Kingsman: The Golden Circle. It's just clearly a step down from the first. The action and general vibe are still solid, and the new additions to the cast are fun, like Pedro Pascal, this movie is Before They Were Big Super Famous. But the big problem comes from the story. We've got unnecessary deaths to give our heroes motivation at the start of the movie. Like, seriously, Eggsy has 2 friends in the first one, but they introduce a 3rd friend in this for the sole purpose of killing him off. Eggsy's romantic subplot is based entirely off of a sex joke from the end of the last movie. I'm aware of the controversy of that joke, and I can see how if you don't get the haha, we're making fun of sexism in old Bond movies bit, it does come off as actually sexist. But basing the protagonist's romance off that joke was just not the right call, especially when they don't even really do anything with his girlfriend besides have her get rightfully upset with him over another weird sex joke, and then turn her into a damsel in distress. And after what feels like the millionth twist, the movie is just too long and the story is just too whack. I still like the world building with the Statesman. Julianne Moore is fun as the villain, and I couldn't get enough of Elton John in every scene he was in. But it really comes down to this just feeling like a worse version of the first one. I really hope that 3rd Eggsy movie is better than this.
I want you to meet my colleague, Dr. Hamilton.
And I'd like you to
Get out of my fucking room!
The Kingsman is the worst one. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen, far from it, but it's the worst Matthew Vaughn film to me. Just imagine Kingsman with no jokes. The action is still wild and characters are still sarcastic, but there's no actual jokes. Just weird situations that come off as more insane and annoying than funny. And when Kingsman, which you could already argue is style over substance, has no comedy to connect you to the characters or fights, it's just boring. It was hard to get invested in the action when I couldn't care less about all the characters. Which is a shame, because the cast is actually really solid, it's just underutilized. They got Stanley Tucci in this, and he's in like 2 scenes. I do like the gimmick of Tom Hollander playing all 3 monarchs, and I enjoyed the before they were big super famous actor for this movie, Harris Dickinson, who isn't big super famous right now, but he has done these, so give it a few years. And the one instance of the movie not being boring is the big twist, which actually got me, I won't lie. But other than that, it's just really uninteresting. The action is arguably good, but how good can action really be if you can't get invested in the stakes of said action? This is the one Matthew Vaughn film that I'd consider to be genuinely style over substance. Now before we get to the ranking, I just wanted to point out a few things I kept seeing in all the movies. Dexter Fletcher, losers becoming heroes, Jason Fleming, The Color Yellow, Mark Strong, and mommy issues. Alright, now it's time to rank them. In 7th is The King's Man. For reasons I just explained, and for the fucking Hitler Thanos reveal in the post-credit scene, I thought it was a joke on teasers like this, not actual setup for the sequel. Boo! 6th is Golden Circle. It's just a worse version, and a lot of the jokes are icky. Wish it was better, moving on. At 5th is Layer Cake. The vibes are cool, but the story is muddled. Guy Ritchie does it better. 4th is Stardust. Really fun time. Love a silly fantasy movie. I just like the top 3 more. Kick-Ass at 3. Great subversion of comic book movies while still being in love with comics. First Class at 2. Great refreshing take on comic book movies. Always need more Charles and Eric being gay. And number 1 is Kingsman: The Secret Service. Just a wild romp through 60s spy iconography. Both a love letter and a ransom note. And there you have it. All Matthew Vaughn films done. Go check out his new movie if you're dying to meet the real Agent Argylle. I hope it's this guy.
Yeah, baby.